should now see a slide. Please let me know if that's not what you are seeing. I'm going to be walking you through a Zendesk ticket, but I wanted to start with some context and framing so that you understand how Zendesk fits into this process overall. So the role of Zendesk within the Get Your Refund pilot is sort of threefold. It collates client information and documents needed for preparation. It defines and tracks the client's path through the virtual process, and it facilitates communication. That communication can be between volunteers in the form of internal notes, at mentions or tags, and followers, which sort of functions as a carbon copy. It can be between volunteers and clients in the form of email, text, and outbound calls. And it can also be in the form of automated updates to the client via email and text. Some terminology which will come up in this section of the meeting and some functions are shown here. Please note that these are not general definitions of these terms, but rather their functionality within this specific pilot. So tickets are what collates the client information and documents. Views track the client's path through the virtual process. Ticket fields provide information about the ticket, and macros do many things. These are, and it kind of depends on the macro. So certain macros do certain things, but that includes populating template messages, completing several actions at once, which reduces manual steps, thereby reducing the opportunity for human error, and ensures consistency, and also occasionally triggers what I refer to as behind the scenes actions like those automated updates. So if you remember nothing else from my section, remember that macros are friends. Use them as often as they are available to you. I'm going to go ahead and jump into Zendesk now. So I'm hoping that you see my Zendesk screen. Please tell me if you don't. I should mention that there are visual Zendesk guides for all roles in this process: intake, prep, and quality review, which should help with training and familiarizing yourselves and your volunteers with Zendesk. I'm going to start with some quick Zendesk navigation, including the sort of an introduction to views and the anatomy of a ticket. So we'll start with the views. Any time that we're working in Zendesk, we want to work within the view page, and that's indicated on the left-hand side with this view icon. You'll see listed in this sort of gray section all of the views that are available. Views are role specific. There are views for intake, for prep, and then there are some roles that will see both intake and prep. I'm currently logged into a demo user with the functionality of a site coordinator or VITA staff member. So I'm seeing both intake and prep views. Everything from this first view, the intake form in progress, all the way down through all online intake clients are views related to the intake process. Below that, starting with unopened and going through completed returns, are views that are related to the preparation and quality review process. Before we go any further, I want to point out the search bar up at the top right-hand corner. This allows you to search for a specific ticket based on client name, ticket number, or keyword. That way you don't have to hop around in the views looking for a specific ticket. All right, so I want to point out the columns in each views as well. They differ based on the views, but you can see some examples here. These are populated based on ticket fields within the ticket and provide helpful information at a glance. So let's go ahead and move into a ticket and take a look at the anatomy. I'm going to start with the ticket fields on the left-hand side, also in a gray box here. These provide information about the ticket. Many ticket fields are set automatically when the ticket is created through GetYourRefund, or when a macro is applied to the ticket. But there are a few that are manually updated, so I'm going to highlight those. We'll start with assignee. This allows you to give someone responsibility for a ticket. So if you want to assign a ticket to a specific preparer or reviewer, you can do so here. Followers, as I mentioned, functions as a carbon copy and sends updates made to the ticket to anyone listed here, and you can search for your users in this bar. The needs more info dropdown, which is shown here, is used whenever more information is needed. It can be applied at any stage in the process. There's also a few checkboxes that can be used as well. The return status bar is used for tax preparation and quality review. So this should be updated during those parts of the process. The certification level dropdown and HSA checkbox should be applied during the intake process. And down toward the bottom is our digital intake status dropdown, which gives us information about the status during the intake process. So moving into the body of the ticket, we see the client's preferred name in the subject line. This can be changed, it's editable. However, the name also appears down below. That should not be changed because it is related to the client's entry in GetYourRefund. So you can make this reflect what should be entered into TaxSlayer if that makes it easier for you to search for the ticket later. Below that, we have the note section. The internal notes, note the yellow box, is a way to provide notes between volunteers. Everything that is entered here will remain private. However, if we move over to public reply, note that the box is now white. Everything entered here will be sent directly to the client. So we want to be sure that we're paying attention to which types of notes we're leaving, but it's good practice to make sure that all messages recorded in Zendesk are professional in case of an accident there. Below that, we see conversations or event views. That can be changed with this dropdown. This essentially logs all documents, information, and communication related to the ticket. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down here. And we'll take a look at the sort of journey of the ticket. So everything that's entered in the conversation view is time-stamped and date-stamped over on the right-hand side. And it shows the newest additions at the top. So we find the information that was entered first at the bottom of the ticket. As Kelly mentioned as she was going through GetYourRefund, there is information that is forwarded to Zendesk at different points in the online intake process on GetYourRefund. So there is some information that we get here when the client is currently in the in progress or gathering documents stage. We also get a preliminary 13614C, which provides some of the answers that have been entered into GetYourRefund. When the client is finished, we will get a finalized version of that 13614C. So it is the responsibility of the intake specialist to kind of keep an eye on people who are hanging out in the in progress or gathering document stage and reach out to them if they've been sitting there for a little while. There are macros related to that. So there is like proactive outreach macros that can be used to provide some support to taxpayers in that step in the process. Once the client finishes with the questions in GetYourRefund, we receive this final 13614C. We also receive the signed consent form, which Kelly went over in GetYourRefund. And once they've uploaded their documents, we get those as well. And we see a W-2 here. This information has changed. This is related to how identities were verified earlier in the pilot. through id.me. Now what you will see in this section is the pictures of the social security cards for the household, picture IDs for taxpayer and spouse, and selfies with IDs for taxpayer and spouse. Once this information flows through from GetYourRefund, the digital intake status is changed automatically to ready for review. Once this is at ready for review, every other change to the digital intake status within Zendesk is done by the intake specialist. That's not automated after that point. So what I'm going to do is pretend that I have reviewed the documents. So essentially we want to make sure that the final 13614C is complete, that it reflects the documents that have been uploaded. If it doesn't, there are macros for that. So we can request for document upload. If I need more information, I can use the macros that are available. One thing to point out with this macro is that it populates a unique URL for the client to use to upload additional documents. They will need to use this to link the documents that they upload to the ticket in Zendesk. I'm actually going to go ahead and delete this. Okay, so if the ticket is ready for the intake interview, I'm actually going to apply a macro for that. So there is a response to client request for interview times macro that I can add here, which inputs the time preference or gives you a space to do that. The time preference is available in the conversation view. To save the information in the ticket, we submit as open. So every time we are sort of finished with the ticket after we've made changes, we have to submit as open for that to be reflected. There is also a macro for the online interview script. So once I'm on the phone with someone, I can use this to guide the conversation and gather information. And I'm going to go ahead and mark this as ready for intake interview, leave this template message from the macro in place, and submit as open just so you can see how a ticket moves within views. Once you submit as open, it does save the information, close the ticket, and sends you back to the views page. And as you can see, my ticket is now in ready for intake interview. Right, so let's get back into this and go on to the next step. So during the intake interview, we want to make sure that we are verifying information, gathering more information as needed. Once that's finished, we are going to apply another macro, which is ready for prep. There's an opportunity to add some notes for the prepare. This macro also changes the digital intake status to complete. Once the digital intake status is complete, it's moved on to the preparation views, starting with unopened. So let's check that as well. And we should see, there we go. My ticket has been moved to unopened and will now be visible to preparers working on returns in Zendesk and TaxSlayer. The unopened view relates to returns that are ready for preparation but have not yet been started in TaxSlayer. Once a return is started in TaxSlayer, this status should be changed. So now we're working in the return status dropdown and we're changing it to in progress. As the preparer works through the return, they'll be changing the return status to follow the path of the return. And it looks a lot like what we see at a typical VITA site. So the return is in progress. When it's finished, it's moved on to quality review. After that, it can be signed. And once it's signed, it can be transmitted. So we have return statuses and corresponding views for each of those steps in the process. So once the return has been prepared fully in TaxSlayer, we can, I believe there's a macro for this actually, let's see. Yep, there's a ready for quality review macro that we can use. It adds a note here in the internal note section and changes the return status automatically, and would move the ticket then to that view so that reviewers could start working on that. Once the review is finished, the quality reviewer will make the quality review call. There is a call feature in Zendesk which records the call for our records and adds that as a note within the ticket. If a cell number is present in the ticket, that means that the client has opted into receiving text messages. The number will be pre-populated here. If there is no cell number available, you do have to enter the new number each time you go to make a call. Once that quality review call is completed, we're going to move the return yet again to ready for e-sign using a macro. I've doubled up on my messages here. So this macro currently adds a note to the ticket. You see this automated notification keyword, which actually triggers some behind the scenes action, which sends an automated update to the client. And it also changes the return status to ready for signature e-sign. At that point, the return can be sent to the taxpayer in DocuSign. Once the return has been reviewed by the client and the 8879 and any other consent forms necessary have been signed, there is an email that is sent to volunteers notifying them that that return has been completed in DocuSign. At that point, we can apply the ready for e-file macro. This macro is not necessary if the transmission in TaxSlayer is done immediately. So it is possible that whoever is checking on DocuSign is also the ERO for the site, and they'd be able to just transmit that return and bypass this step in the Zendesk process completely. In that case, they would mark the return as completed. Apparently there's no macro for that. So they would mark it here as completed and submit as open. That means that the return has been transmitted and we're waiting on the acknowledgement from the IRS and the state. Once the acknowledgement comes in, there's one last step in the process, which is to apply the relevant macro. So there is return accepted and return rejected. The return accepted macro adds a note here, sends an automated update to the client, updates the status after filing ticket field on the left, and actually triggers a survey to be sent to the client for Code for America to gather some client feedback that they can use to make improvements or changes to the process. So that is it for a high-level overview of Zendesk. So I'll stop sharing at this time.